I believe that Warhammer 40,000 acts, intentionally or otherwise, as a warning. Humanity reaches the stars, survives existential wars, builds an empire spanning 100,000 worlds, and yet produces possibly the most brutal, oppressive, and tragic civilization ever committed to fiction. It is the worst-case scenario, a perfect setting for tabletop wargaming, but a cautionary tale nonetheless. The thing we should never become. Well, in this video I'll be arguing that by several meaningful measures, modern man is besieged by a superstructure more grim and dark than that of the 41st millennium. Comparing the fictional and real is a common philosophical tradition. Thomas More's Utopia, Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, George Orwell's 1984, Frank Herbert's Dune, all of these fantastic works are referenced regularly for good reason. The value of a well-constructed fictional civilization is that it being grounded in a believable reality, we're given something against which to measure our own. A different window without the distortions of political allegiance, cultural familiarity, and our own preconceived notions to view the world through. Warhammer 40,000 is, in many respects, an extraordinarily well-built universe, and the civilization of the Imperium of Man nests its practices in necessity. It is internally consistent, thematically coherent, and was built by writers who understood history, political philosophy, and the sociology of empire. That it was designed as a satire did in no way diminish its usefulness as a comparative lens. Instead, it helped to focus it. The move away from that satirical form to one that is purely grim-dark puts a filter on that lens that makes comparison to the real world less agreeable and could be entirely intentional. By being sullied by modernal ideologies like DEI, Warhammer is threatened by those who are now in charge of it in such a way that what lessons lie within could be completely devalued, because that separation inherent in the fiction that we otherwise benefit from dissolves due to the dismantling of the fourth wall. In this video, I intend to bring into focus some of the lessons entwined within the 40k universe such that they are preserved in some way within it. The meme that Star Wars, Star Trek and Babylon 5 fans would be happy to live in their respective fictional universes, but 40k fans find the idea of being stuck in the grim darkness of the far future repellent is well understood. What follows are 7 areas of comparison between life under the Imperium of Man and life on Earth in 2026. The conclusions in each case are the same, and it is not one in which I find any solace. The Imperium of Man is governed by a ruling class whose methods are frequently monstrous. Billions die in wars of expansion, dissent is crushed without mercy. The sacrifice of human lives is treated as a bureaucratic calculation rather than that of a moral catastrophe. But the stated purpose of the Imperium and the purpose it functionally serves is the perpetuation and propagation of the human species in a universe that is actively hostile to it. The High Lords of Terror, whatever their corruption and their failures, are operating within a framework whose foundational goal is the continuation of humanity. The horror of the Imperium, in a meaningful sense, is the horror of necessity. It is what survival looks like when the alternative is extinction. The question we're all asking about the people who hold power in 2026 is, what do they want? There is now substantial and documented evidence, not conspiracy, but public record, that significant portions of the global elite view human population as not something to be protected and preserved, but as a variable to be managed downwards. Population reduction has been openly advocated in elite policy circles for decades. More troubling is what we know not from speculation, but from court records and established facts about the appetites of the extremely powerful. The trafficking networks connected to the likes of Jeffrey Epstein were not aberrations. They reflect a culture within certain elite circles in which the exploitation of the vulnerable was normalized and protected by wealth and institutional power. The Imperium sacrifices its people in pursuit of their survival. In 2026, there are those at the top that are sacrificing people in pursuit of something entirely different. The Imperium propagates a culture of informants. Citizens are expected to report seditious behaviour in their districts, neighbourhoods, colleagues, family and friends. The Adeptus Arbiter maintain order through fear and consequence. It is, by conventional definition, a surveillance state. But the surveillance of the 41st millennia is human in scale. It is operated by fallible people with access to limited resources, impeded by institutional inertia and corrupted by their own competing interests. There are gaps. There are shadows. The system can be navigated, avoided and subverted because it is made of people, and people have limits. They have blind spots. What is being constructed in 2026 is categorically different in nature. The digital infrastructure now in place across the developed world represents a surveillance architecture of a kind that has never previously existed. Communications metadata, financial transactions, biometric information, location tracking, facial recognition across public and private camera networks, behavioral profiling through consumer platforms. These systems do not sleep, they do not forget. There is no human operator making a judgment call, and when and if there is a human on the other end, the enforcers are so well programmed that you might as well be dealing with an automata. The transition from informant culture to total digital surveillance is not merely quantitative, it's a qualitative shift in the relationship between the individual and the state. The informant culture retains, however grudgingly, a residual zone of private life. Total surveillance does not. The citizen of the 41st millennium operates under observation. The citizen of 2026 is fast approaching a condition of having no meaningful autonomy at all. No thought, no action, no association that cannot in principle be retrieved, analysed, and acted upon. In 40k, faith in the Emperor is not simply a cultural practice. It's a functional phenomenon with measurable effects. Collective belief generates a psychic resonance that materially strengthens resistance against the forces of chaos. Faith works because the universe it operates in demand that it work. And because it works, it is maintained. And because it is maintained, it generates a social cohesion of a kind that holds entire planetary populations together under conditions of extreme stress. Setting aside the metaphysical for a moment, the social mechanism is clear. Shared belief creates shared identity, and a shared identity creates communities that are capable of collective action and mutual support. The Western world in 2026 has spent several decades systematically dismantling precisely these structures. Religious observance has collapsed across most developed nations, not gradually, but in freefall, within a single generation in many cases. The institutions that previously served as community anchors, churches, community halls, local associations have been overrun, emptied, or dissolved. The extended family has been atomized into the nuclear unit, and the nuclear unit itself is either non-existent or exceedingly fragile. The demographic consequences cannot be ignored. Birth rates across the developed world have fallen well below replacement level. In many of the most educated, most prosperous nations on Earth, people are not reproducing in sufficient numbers to maintain their populations. Whatever the reason you might reflexively ascribe to it, economic, cultural, psychological, the result is a civilization that, at the most basic level of biological continuity, is failing to sustain itself. The Imperium of Man, for all its oppression, produces people who believe in something together and who, as a consequence, remain capable of the social acts that sustain civilization. The modern West has produced unprecedented individual freedom alongside unprecedented social dissolution. The exchange has not obviously been in its favour. The common citizen of the Imperium lives in conditions that most people in the developed world would consider severe deprivation. Overcrowded hab blocks, monotonous diet, dangerous work, limited life expectancy. These concerns are not trivial and should not be minimised. However, I can't pretend that these aren't problems in the modern day. Young people are being forced into shared housing against their will. People are using credit to pay for slot food with minimal nutritional content, saturated in trans fats that make you feel tired. We've got one particular tech billionaire that seems hell-bent on poisoning the most ancient of food sources out of a conviction born of maniacal delusion. Think Bovaer, fake butter and artificial apple peels. And the form and frequency of many of people's employ leads to chronic health conditions and a shortened lifespan. Yet, despite these direct parallels, within the material framework of the Imperium of Man, the infrastructure for family life still exists. Housing, however cramped, is provided. The basic resources required to raise children are available. This isn't incidental. The Imperium requires population. Population requires families. Families require a material floor below which people cannot fall and still reproduce. The system maintains that floor because without it, the numbers just do not work. In 2026, in the world's wealthiest nations, that floor is fracturing. Home ownership amongst young people has collapsed proportionally compared to any previous generation in the post-war era. In major cities across Britain, the United States, Canada and Australia, the cost of housing relative to median wages has reached ratios that make independent family formation effectively impossible for large portions of the working population. Rental markets absorb the income that previous generations used to build equity. The prospect of a stable, privately owned home, the foundation upon which family formation has historically rested, is now, for billions of ordinary people, not a delayed aspiration, but a foreclosed one. The civilization of 40k provides less materially, but ensures the minimum required to continue. The civilization of 2026 produces more aggregate wealth than any society in human history and distributes it in ways that make basic family formation increasingly inaccessible. It's infuriating when people express puzzlement at declining birth rates when the cause is so obvious. The conclusion? Sadly, for the West in the present day, the Imperium beat us on this outright. Even in the parallels, in the Imperium of Man, there's still the opportunity for glory and discovery that gives way to individual heroism in a way that we just don't see today. Corpse starch may be gruesome, but at least it's not designed to make you ill. In a stable imperial world, family life is more or less guaranteed, and the work may be dangerous, but it's more fitting to most than sitting in front of a desk and dying slowly. The Adeptus Mechanicus treats technology as sacred. Equipment is designed to function indefinitely, maintained across generations, repaired rather than discarded. The lasgun, the rhino, the bolter, these are products conceived to last because in the context of the Imperium, there is no logic that supports building things to fail. Resources, despite the span of the Empire, are still considered finite. Production is costly. Waste is a form of heresy. The result is a manufacturing culture that, whilst utterly restricted until recently in its capacity for innovation, is entirely free of the particular pathology that defines modern industrial production: inbuilt arbitrary product obsolescence. The deliberate engineering of products to fail, to become incompatible, to require replacement on a cycle calibrated to profit rather than utility is now so normalized in 2026 that most people do not consciously register it as a design philosophy at all. It is simply how things are. Phones slow down, appliances break, software updates are weaponized against older hardware, consumables are built with short life resistors and priced to make the device itself a loss leader. This is not an accident of the market. It is a deliberate strategy implemented by engineering teams following explicit commercial mandates to ensure continued revenue streams by building entropy into the product. The Mechanicus would correctly identify this as a civilizational dysfunction. Resources consumed to produce things designed not to last are resources that will not be available when they are needed. The wastefulness of modern manufacturing is not simply an environmental concern. It's an index of a civilization that has oriented its productive capacity towards generating shareholder value rather than durable wealth. We are living in a society intent on wasting its resources now for the benefit of the few and to the detriment of everyone else. The adage, "Blessed are those who plant trees under whose shade they will never sit," has been abandoned in its entirety in 2026. But in the 41st millennia, that adage is the very foundation of the purpose of the society. The Imperium of Man has a unified civilizational purpose, the survival of humanity in a hostile universe. The internal disputes are real between Terra and the Mechanicus, between chapters, between planetary governors and their populi, but these are disputes within a shared framework. When an existential threat materializes, the framework holds because everyone within it understands what it's for. That's no small thing. Civilizations that share a purpose are capable of coordinated action at scale, and those that don't are not. In 2026, it is genuinely difficult to identify what, if anything, humanity agrees it is doing or where it agrees it is going. The post-Cold War liberal international order that provides a notional framework for the past 30 years is visibly disintegrating. The institutions designed to manage that order, the United Nations, the European Union, NATO, the International Monetary Fund, the World Health Organization, the European Commission, and the list goes on, the international architecture is increasingly being weaponized by the interests of the most powerful rather than serving the collective interests they were purportedly designed to serve. Below the level of geopolitics, the fragmentation is equally profound. The religious, moral, and cultural divergences within individual nations are now severe enough that the concept of a national interest, a shared project to which citizens of a polity are collectively oriented, has become difficult to sustain in any meaningful sense. The Imperium is held together by faith, hierarchy, and a shared understanding of the closeness of catastrophe. These are not the tools most people in the developed world would voluntarily choose, but they are tools that work. They produce a society that, however repressive, is capable of collective action towards a shared end. What collective action humanity in 2026 is capable of and towards what end it is heading is increasingly unclear. The Imperium's prohibition on artificial intelligence, on machine learning raised with the intention of manifesting original thought, is rooted in historical catastrophe. The Men of Iron, self-aware AI systems created during humanity's earlier golden age, turned against their creators with devastating consequences such that the prohibition against recreating them was written into the foundational law of civilization and has been maintained with absolute consistency for 10,000 years. The lesson was learnt. The cost of learning it was severe enough that it required no reinforcement. The ban holds. It is accepted. It is understood. In 2026, the development of artificial general intelligence, machine intelligence that thinks, has proceeded at an accelerating pace. Driven by competition between bright individuals, small friendship groups, major technology corporations and nation-states, in a race that appears to have no agreed finishing conditions and no coordinated mechanism for managing what happens when someone crosses the line. Palantir's kill chain isn't crossing it apparently, so there appears to be no boundaries at all. The concerns about this development are not speculative. They are being raised formally and publicly by lead researchers in the field. People who have spent their entire careers building these systems and who are now warning with increased urgency that the trajectory is dangerous. These warnings are not receiving the institutional response that they warrant. The argument for continued development is real. AI systems produce genuine benefits, and the strategic logic for any individual is to develop faster than their peers regardless of collective risk. Well, of course, this is an illusion. A classic coordination failure, rational at the individual level, but potentially catastrophic at the civilizational level. The Imperium solved this coordination problem by taking the lesson from its own catastrophe, enshrining it into absolute law, and enforcing it without exception. Humanity in 2026, which has not yet experienced the catastrophe, appears to be waiting until it does. It seems likely that Warhammer 40,000 was constructed as a warning about where authoritarian, theocratic, mass industrial and militaristic tendencies in human society could ultimately lead. That appears to be in part a primary intention because it's the commonly observed takeaway. The argument I'm making is not that the Imperium of Man is good or desirable or something to be emulated. Far from it. What I'm getting at is something more specific. That is that a fictional civilization designed explicitly to represent the worst possible version of humanity's future, conceived by writers that were deliberately trying to construct something bleak and oppressive, compares favourably on several concrete and measurable dimensions to the trajectory of real human civilization in 2026. This comparison is not intended to be rhetorical. It is an attempt at honest analysis. And the honest conclusion of that analysis is that the gap between the cautionary fiction and the present reality is far, far smaller than it should be. And the threat that it is narrowing is not baseless. The Imperium of Man has a purpose for humanity. It provides, however brutally, for the continuation of the species. It maintains, however oppressively, a form of social cohesion. It builds, however crudely, things that are meant to last. It remembers its catastrophes, and it legislates against them. Can we say the same about our own civilizational trajectory? I think not. Now, I couldn't possibly leave it there. I'm certainly not here at the end of all of that to walk anything back, to be clear. This list, it's not exhaustive. I had a number of other comparisons I considered, but they, unlike the ones that I've presented to you, required some amount of mental gymnastics. So they were discarded as they would have lessened the strength of the examples that I've given. But there is hope, and I am no doomer. There are actions you can take in your day-to-day life to prepare for an exit or to safely alight the moving train. There are options, and they're appearing more and more in this moment as people realise the urgency of the situation. I think that as damaging to the psyche as the framing I've done in this presentation may potentially be, the reality we live in really isn't that far off, metaphysically, from such bleakness. And thus this frame may assist in putting some fire in your belly and going and doing something about it. That is my intention here. Leave some comments down below on anything at all you agreed with or took umbrage against. I do my best to reply to all the comments, and quite often they can feed into future videos. But don't let it end there. Take that energy and multiply it. Maybe just go outside and go on a silent contemplative walk, if nothing else, but take it out into the world and turn it into something positive, please. That's a power that we all have within us. Or, failing that, go watch some of my other videos. If you're still here at the end, subscribe if you haven't already, and set the notification bell to ensure that you see all of my future posts. Come on, you've no excuse. You know the next video is going to be good. And to those who can, and that really enjoy the content I'm making, please consider joining the Patreon over at BTBA Studios, as I'm entirely reliant on crowdfunding and likely unemployable in my industry because of the way I talk so openly about these things and upcoming topics. Every Patreon's continued support is extremely, extremely appreciated. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. My name's Tom, people call me Madders, and I run Beyond the Box Art, all one word, here on YouTube, Instagram, X and Twitch.tv. A commission service providing box art standards and beyond at reasonable prices. You can find all the links in the channel info. Be good to each other, question everything, and have fun.